Just do it. It'll turn out okay. Welcome to Talking Time with Caffeine, the podcast where we talk about stuff, be it political, social, movies, games, anything. Today, well, I'll let her herself.
Hey guys, how you doing? My name is Cynthia. Am uh I am a human being that actually hosts the the show The Roots Matter, where we talk about news, politics, social secularism, and also social justice. It all collides right there on the YouTubes. So, hi guys.
So,
Thanks for having me, Vandalia.
no problem. So what? So why do you pick that name?
Why did I pick The Roots Matter?
Yeah, story,
Uh,
story behind that.
Yeah. I sure. There's always a story somewhere, right? So I had been on another podcast with the atheist community of Austin called the Nonprofits, and I was moving on from there, and I desired to have more in-depth conversations about the world around us, and I was interested in not only just like talking about like news and politics and social issues and things of that nature, but I really wanted to get to the heart of why things are the way that they are, right? So um you know that like things just don't exist in a vacuum. They come from somewhere. And so I I kept saying to myself, I want to get to the root of the matter when it comes to, what's going on in the world, what's going on in the lives of people, what's going on in our country. And that's where I was like, oh, okay. Well, that's the name of the show, The Roots Matter. And that's how it came to be.
So, like the country thing, has this always been your passion, or is it more a recent development?
Um, well, I would definitely say that it's not very recent, but it's not something that has always been the case with me. I believe that I got more involved or more aware of politics. I want to say, well, I've always been aware of politics and always been aware of like, the things that's going on. But I started to really get into it, like the activism portion of it, and also really wanting to talk about it. I would say mostly right before the pandemic. Um, I was uh, I was recruited to YouTube basically by another YouTuber that comes on from time to time named Ethan Michael, and his channel is Your Friendly Neighborhood Atheist. And I remember when he first started his show, I was listening to Talk Heathen when Eric and V were still the host, and I was listening to. He ended up calling and he said, "Hey, I'm going to be starting a channel soon. I need some advice." And so Eric and V gave him some advice for, starting. I think I want to say this was around 2000, around 2019, 2020-ish rather. And so I remember him saying that he was from the Chicagoland area, which is where I'm from. And I was like, I'm going to go ahead and check this guy out. Right. So I happened to look him up, and I was listening to a debate that he did with this guy named oh God, what is this? I'm looking Larry the Christian. Yeah, that's his name, Larry the Christian. So they did a debate, and I was commenting on some of the things that Larry was saying um, to Ethan when they were having their exchange. And then Ethan saw my comments, was like, oh my God, I need to meet you. I need to have a conversation with you, right? And so we were we were talking, and he said, I want to expand some of the content on my channel. I want to do a reaction video to Steven Crowder. And that's when he used to go to these um, campuses and debate college students at his table, like, prove me wrong or change my mind or whatever the heck he used to say, right? So I never even knew who Stephen Crowder was. Ethan is the one who kind of told me who this guy is. And I listened to the video and I was like, oh my God, this is so full of it. I don't know where to start, right? So we actually did a live reaction video and then he put it up on his channel. So fast forward, um, I believe the pandemic happens and the mortality rates start to come out about
Mhm.
the different marginalized groups specifically that were more affected by by COVID than some others. And when the two distinctive groups that suffered the highest percentage of mortality rates are African Americans and Indigenous people. So um, he asked me and another Christian that he debated in the past if we could do a show about it and we could talk about these things and why is it that African Americans specifically are dying more than other groups when it comes to the pandemic. So we did the show. It was pretty good. I would say that we had a really good discussion. And then that's when Ethan was like, okay, you guys need to do the show as a regular thing. And so we ended up starting a separate news channel that was part of the Your Friendly Neighborhood Atheist network. And that's when we started to do the very first YouTube show that I was on my own, which is called the 13%. I had a co-host, and he ended up leaving, and then at the time, my partner at the time ended up taking over and becoming the co-host with me. So um, so yeah, I would say like between 2019 is kind of where I just like really just start to see 2019, 2020, especially with the pandemic and seeing all the different things that were happening specifically, when it came to deaths that really, sparked my interest to getting more into politics and activism and history. And that's when I was just consuming books. I was reading all these different historical reference books. I always like to read, but I mostly read like historical fiction, romantic novels because they were escapes for me. But being more into this particular area really sparked my interest to actually say, you know what, I need to learn more. I need to do more. I need to consume more information because right now the info that I have when it comes to even positionality of African Americans in the United States is tertiary at best. So that's when I really dedicated myself to studying more, to learning more about history, and then getting more involved.
Yeah, I've always been into history, really, ever since I was a kid. That was my favorite subject in school and stuff. So
Mm,
I've always learned stuff. The political aspect of it was a little bit more recently, but it's always been there because uh, my family's, at least my dad, has always been very not really political per se, but definitely one sided on the thing, and me and mom used to go to church a lot, but once the church we were going to started going more political about stuff,
mm,
that's when first I was the last one to drop away. But slowly, everyone in my family started quitting church when they started pushing the right side of stuff on the church thing all the time.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's when did that happen?
Well, I have I think I officially left about 2010 to 2010. Oh,
Mm, hmm.
that's when I started. That's when I started my deconversion. Deconstruction.
Okay, gotcha. So would you say that they started like picking up more political speak, especially after George W. Bush became president?
Oh, that was like the yeah. I think that was when it started, but I didn't at the time. I didn't really care. I didn't. I went there for social reasons, really.
Yeah,
Help out
yeah.
and stuff. But
Mm,
until
mm-hmm.
it finally got so bad, I couldn't. Just
Yeah, yeah. I know that like when George Bush was became president, I was a Christian,
are you talking about the senior or junior?
junior.
Right.
Yeah, junior. I mean, I came out as atheist in 2018. I went through a very long
Yeah.
round a long I think that like, my light bulb moment to the finally when I finally said that I'm an atheist was like 11 years.
Yeah. I think I was 2019, 2020 is when I finally admitted it to my finally. This, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I'm an atheist. Yeah, it I didn't I kind of bounced around a lot, but I know for me when at the time that he became president, I remember when he was running, and I was part of um Christian groups, like student groups, because I was in college at the time, and I can't remember what those recognized organizations are, to be honest with you, what they were called, but like but I was part of them, right? Sometimes we would. I hung out with a lot of the kids at that particular time. We went to church together. We used to do like our Friday night worship
Yeah,
um
I was
stuff.
for a long time. I was an assistant youth director and photographer
Yeah,
for my church,
yeah,
and for a while I even wanted to be a youth pastor. That was one of my
yeah. I was studying to be a minister too, like while I was I would say like towards the end of my college career, transitioning into more like adulthood, working, like I was studying to be a minister. But yeah, I remember specifically when he started to run, and I would see like all of my friends who it seemed like that we were all on the same page until he came along.
Mhm.
And I didn't understand because like like I had problems with some of the things that he was saying, and also I had and I never liked right wing agenda, never, ever.
Of
And
course, it's always been bad. I don't think it's as been bad as it has been in the last so often. I
yeah,
think
I
it's
would
like
say in the past 10 years it's gotten worse, but
yeah, as bad as yeah. I've had several people talk about how they hated Bush back in the day, but
yeah.
they now they miss that they like they'd rather be back.
Right, if they had a choice, who would they what would they take? Yeah, like George, come back. But I was like, yo, whoa, 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 before you say all that, he was not a good president.
No,
He really was not. I remember when he was in a conference, in a press conference, and one of the reporters threw his shoes
I
at
remember
him.
that.
But I have to say about George W. He ducked real quick. Like I could tell he was in shape.
The only positive things I can say, the only positive thing I say about him was he didn't have a cult following. I don't think.
No, he just had like that white evangelical following, people who really leaned on to that, because the narrative at that time was that he got saved at a camp meeting led by Billy Graham, and therefore, because he was saved at a Graham camp meeting, you should vote for him.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. You're not like agree with me anymore, really. But that's compared to his son. Uh, as far as I know, Gra- the father Graham guy didn't like really go. He didn't like one way or the other. He president no
Yeah,
matter what. Like he was like
yeah, yeah. HW was very, very middle of the road. Very, I would very center right. with his
Yeah, but
politics.
it's
He
funny.
never talked a lot about God and stuff like that. It was
It's
his son that picked it up more.
it's funny though. The son too. Even my dad, who's mainly who's all who's who was a strictly Democrat, not really liberal, I guess, but more. But anyways, even he after 9/11 happened, even
Mhm.
he started doing the flag thing and on his window and stuff that.
Yeah.
So it's like, but then once the Iraq thing happened, that's when he like never mind. Like
Yeah.
9/11 was like oh, fully support country, yeah. Then
Yeah.
why are we going? Then they're like, why are we going to Iraq
Wha-
for?
Right, exactly. You know what? And that was like when I really started to becoming more paying more attention to politics, and it was that reason, right? Because like I think that it was pretty easy to say that the majority of the country, and even if we look at polling from back at that time, the majority of the country was just like that, super patriarchal, really want to hold on to the flag, and to the point where the flag becomes part of your heart, like literally you are beating the red, white, and blue in your chest, right? And I mean, we were all coming together, we were mourning the deaths of the people who died on the planes in Philadelphia, the people who lost their lives in the Twin Towers, the tragedy that really happened. But it's what happened afterwards, because like if you all said like, okay, well, the guy who did this was Osama bin Laden, and he's an and the people in the government from the Afghanistan, the Taliban is protecting him, then yeah, it makes sense that you go to Afghanistan because you want to get him and you want to get the people out of the way that's protecting him. But then we went to Iraq, and I'm like, why are we going to Iraq? And a lot of the things that they were saying about, oh, the centrifuges, and Hussein is building a nuclear weapon, and
The
you
same
know
thing. The same thing they're saying now about Iran.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And he wasn't, and they aren't, and they never were. um they, so we have to go in and we have to, and finish the job from Desert Storm.
Yeah,
I love the whole thing, like he tried to kill my daddy, like
yeah.
no.
It's funny thing is his dad. Yeah, his that reason he went in, got him out of Kuwait, and then left. It's
Yeah,
like
yeah,
okay, you're
yeah. I mean, like, how long was Desert Storm? Desert Storm was like a matter of months. He got in, they got out.
and
Um,
and
I,
we had and we had help because people believed in what we're doing back then.
exactly, exactly. They had but I remember like a lot of the debates at that time about, utilizing NATO to go and actually do, with Iraq. A lot of the NATO countries said that they didn't really want to participate, but he was able to still get a coalition of countries like England, because
I
they
think about the
bought
first one or the
what
second
he
one.
said, the
I think
first
the first
one.
one or second. Okay,
I'm talking
yeah.
about when they went back to Iraq.
Oh,
Um, when they been back to Iraq after, okay, so after 9/11 they went to Afghanistan, right?
so the second time.
Yeah, the second time. Yeah, they went to Afghanistan. They started the war there, and then Bush and Cheney was like, "Hey, we need to go to Iraq because Saddam Hussein is all involved too," and he was not. And
Yeah,
but
yeah.
but they lied and said that he was.
Wasn't I don't know if wasn't Saddam like the I can't remember correctly. Wasn't he like the opposite faction of Islam?
He I want to say he was. I think he's Sunni,
Yeah,
because I believe that in Iran, I believe that they are Shia,
yeah,
but he was Sunni, and but he was still considered, Islam, right?
yeah,
He was an Islamic leader, but Iraq on a whole wasn't like Iran when it came to being a totalitarian theocratic state. That was not really Iraq.
at least before we got hold of got in there.
Before we got a hold of it, right? Exactly. I mean, it's so interesting how when we practice imperialism that people start to, cleave on to their religion even harder. Grief. But yeah, I remember the banner, the mission accomplished. That he flew, that he had on one of the naval ships, and but they still, but I'm like, okay, so it's over, right? You did everything you're supposed to do, you can get out. No, we're not out yet. Like, wait,
Yeah, it's
what?
funny. It's funny. Going back to the first one, I remember it was people thought it was a big deal because apparently it was our first big victory since Vietnam.
According to Bush.
I don't know, but I don't know. We really had. And it's just weird. I looked it up. We've only declared war of free. We've only officially declared war very few times, like 6 or 7 times in history of the
Right.
country.
Yeah. As far as like Congress has gone, yeah, a majority of times, like anytime that we actually like got involved with conflict with different countries, it was more like military actions, kind of like what this is supposed to be. Even though Iran is not, there has been no declaration of war,
Yeah,
but the leader, dear leader, keeps calling it a war.
yeah. Like I didn't know this for that the Civil War wasn't officially a war.
Mm-mm.
I always thought it was a war, but
It wasn't official. I mean, it wasn't a declaration that happened at first because of the secession of the South.
it
Yeah,
just it was we classify it as just a in country problem thing.
yeah. Well, the Civil War is interesting because this was not like a gathering of like congressional members to like specifically declare war on the South because of their secession. In actuality, what ended up happening is that the South secedes like one state at a time, and then they in turn basically declared war on the Union because they wanted to make sure that they kept states' rights.
Yeah. Think of that. Where do you land on the whole lost cause myth thing?
Um, well, the lost cause myth is exactly that. It was an attempt by the Daughters of the Confederacy to basically rewrite history. I mean, the South got beat. They got beat bad. And it didn't, even though it's interesting, it really didn't start that way. The South was actually winning. It wasn't until reluctantly Lincoln allowed ex-slaves to actually participate in the war and enlist as soldiers in the army, in the Union Army. That's when they really started to see a tide turn when it came to um, the battles that they had, that they actually
Yeah.
started to win more than to lose. And so by the time that the Union Army got deep into the South and started to confiscate land and confiscate, other property from, especially like a lot of these plantation owners, they got beat bad. And so it's always about rewriting history in order to try to make your side look good, right?
Hmm.
So that's when you had this whole narrative, and it's so funny because one of the things that the Daughters of the Confederacy got into was textbook writing. And when you look at, I believe, McGraw-Hill textbooks, though, that was a company that wrote textbooks that was at the behest of the Daughters of the Confederacy, where they were teaching and sending these books to schools that slavery wasn't that bad. Slaves were treated like family. Slaves were happy. It was the big bad North that came and broke up the families when they were happy, and now they're displaced. What are you going to do now? And
Yeah,
yeah,
I'm sure they are so happy when they bred them and sold their kids.
Yeah, yeah. When you like separated families, sold their children to, to other, plantations or God knows where. There's this book called They Were Her Property. I read it like about I want to say about 3 years ago. And it was about slavery, that slaves that were actually owned by women. And come to find out that 40% of slave owners were women, were white women specifically. And a lot of them, it wasn't like, this direct way that they owned the slaves. So sometimes they get them as gifts, sometimes they got them as inheritance. Um, you know, that's usually, sometimes they got them because the husband had them, and so now the wife does too. Uh, it's interesting. They had one story in the book where um, there was this something that happened often with slaves is that owners would lease their slaves to other plantations, other industries, factories, even, um, and whatever the slave earned as their wages is basically what the owner was able to get because it was their property. It was the property owned. It was basically their property that was working for them, and they got to keep their wages. Anyway,
Yeah,
there
yeah,
was so the lady. So there was this woman who was basically leased out for a time period in order for her to work. And when she came back to the plantation, her children were at um, her daughter came up to the mother and said, "That's brother, that's brother," and she was pointing to the slave owner, which happened to be the lady of the house, counting out money. And she was counting out money because she sold the brother, her son, because she wanted to buy a new dress. Yeah.
yeah. It's funny that not funny, but ironic. I got into an argument, or I guess, with Civil War apologists or something. Apologists or something. I don't know what you call them, but you know how they talk about how Amer- America was so bad because we import the least amount of slaves to America than everywhere else. And I like, you know why that is? Like why? Well, because everywhere else they worked so hard to death that they had to, like this in the Caribbean and the
Mm-hmm.
uh, Port, Brazil, they worked so hard they had to import more. Yeah, we were we I mean, because we survived long enough they can have kids. It was
Right.
his own problem, but
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like, oh yeah. So, because of Southern hospitality, like slavery in the United States was so genteel, and that's just a load of crap. Okay. So, for full disclosure, my paternal side is American from the South. My maternal side is from the Caribbean. And I am a descendant of slaves from both sides. Now, it is true that working on the sugar cane plantations were very brutal. And there is evidence to show that that slaves specifically worked themselves to death. Like, anthropologists were able to find bones of slaves that died on the sugarcane plantations and saw how like their muscles were separated from their skeletal frames because they worked so hard. But that does not negate the
mhm.
cruelty and the burden of slavery in the United States. United States is the only country that was not only founded but built on the institution of slavery that was baked into the Constitution as their primary labor force in order for them to gain economic world power.
Yeah, I don't. I think what was worse though. working so hard that they have to eat that order more, or not working that hard but surviving enough to have so they can have kids to propagate more. I don't, you know,
I mean,
like
I mean, like, okay, well, yeah, we're whipping them just a little bit less, but let's not get it twisted. There are accounts and documents showing pregnant women in this in during slavery time here in the States, where if they would be punished, they would lay on their stomachs and get beat on their backs. Or sometimes like they still get strung up being pregnant on trees.
yeah,
I mean, like they may have like, altered the body position, but they still beat them, you know? So like, and I mean, like, you also have to understand as well, when a baby is born from an enslaved mother, that baby automatically becomes a slave and property to the slave owner, the slave master, that for whatever property or plantation or outfit that they belong to. So it was in their best interest not to, maybe to be a bit more concerned on making sure that they, did the bare minimum for
yeah,
their
because
slaves.
because they could get new slaves without importing more of them.
Yeah, exactly. And also, um, remember the transatlantic slave trade was, I want to say it was outlawed as far as like, being able to import slaves to the Americas. I want to say like in 1803,
Yeah,
1804.
something like that.
Not, yeah, it
Yeah,
was it was
the Constitution had 20 year. The Constitution had 20-year clause. Like we can do it for 20 more years, but then it's over with.
and then that's it. We're done. you know. I mean, now there were slave traders that violated that all the damn time. I think that the last import of slaves in the United States specifically was in 1864 in Alabama.
Well, even the middle of the war.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, they were those slaves were on a schooner. They that had to dodge a lot of the patrols. But sometimes a lot of those patrols were on the take. You just pay them a little, a little fare, a toll, a little bribe, and they'll turn a blind eye.
Yeah, yeah. I heard a lot of even Northerners, even though they might have been anti-slavery, they weren't like full abolitionists.
No, they weren't. And let's also remember that the North benefited from slavery too. Even though like industry was more so in the North and the South was more of the agrarian states, it was still they were still making ships, they were still making chains, they were still and also sometimes slaves would migrate and work in those industries as well, like leasing in these particular industries, and that money being sent back to the South for their labor. And and like I said, everybody, I remember specifically Candace Owens made this argument that it wasn't slavery that gave America its economic floor, it was the Industrial Revolution. And I was like, sister girlfriend, where do you think that they got the capital in order for them to get into the Industrial Revolution in the first place?
And another thing another thing that's resolved the Civil War is something that the current administration is trying to outlaw, and that's the 14th Amendment.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I was and I need to get this video done. Because like I know recently the Supreme Court heard arguments against birthright citizenship, and they said that it should be repealed, and one of their biggest arguments is that because birthright citizenship was supposed to help slaves. Now all the black people basically have already been, that they have that have been here for generation after generation already have benefited from that clause. So there's no reason to have it any longer. But, I would argue that if you could repeal birthright citizenship, then that also gives them the opportunity to repeal other rights and privileges that come specifically with birthright citizenship, and that could be even looked at to people who happen to be like me, whose ancestry came from slavery, right? So it could affect us adversely as well. Because like you think about before the 14th Amendment and before the 14th and the 15th Amendment specifically, who are the only people who could vote?
Uh, rich white male, rich white male landowners.
Right, right. Male, white, male landowners. Those are the only people who could vote. The 15th Amendment actually, with the 14th, in conjunction with the 14th Amendment, expanded the rights that any person who is considered a citizen at the time, if you're a man only, could vote, right? You had to fast forward to I believe in 1920, between 1920 and 1921, when we get the 19th Amendment, and they expanded that to women who happen to be citizens. And then the caveats that came oftentimes with voting, specifically like in this and during Jim Crow, where they
Like the
were employing
the poll tax amendment.
poll taxes, literacy test, damn near just shoot you for just trying to register in the first goddamn place. Um, that's when we get the Voter Rights Act that, basically does away with all those particular caveats in order for any person who is deemed a citizen when they get to this particular age, you have the right to vote.
Yeah, and then
right?
finally extended to 18. Of last time it got extended to the
Say that
18
one
year
more
old.
time.
And the
Yeah,
last one was the 18-year-old one.
right, exactly. Extended to 18-year-olds. So like when I see this whole argument on birthright citizenship, I've heard, black folk who lean right saying, "Oh no, this is a good thing for us. It's going to protect our and solidify our rights to vote." But you forget that specifically on the right, they've been gutting and taking away certain, portions of the Voting Rights Act. And I even read an article as of late where it specifically talked about John Roberts. And one of his biggest legacies was disenfranchising voting and making it more difficult and really taking away a lot of the rights that come with voting through different decisions that he, basically was the concurring voice on.
Was he
So,
is he the Supreme Court justice?
yeah.
Yeah, I heard a rumor that he was scared people might consider him not as bad, but this at the same level as the same guy who ruled on the Dred Scott case.
He's damn near close. He damn near close. I mean, just think about it. It's like the majority of your legacy as a Supreme Court justice is gutting the Voters' Rights Act. I mean, it was under his watch that you had the Voters' Rights Act that was gutted back in 2013. Him, you know, and and now that we're hearing this particular case, which precedent already has been set for voter right for birthright citizenship. There is no reason at all for them to take up this particular case as far as like arguing what do they mean by the 14th Amendment when it came to birthright citizenship. And so
Yeah,
the 14th Amendment is clear.
If you're born here, you're a citizen.
Yeah. And subject to the jurisdiction thereof to the United States, so you are here as a citizen. Period. That's it. You know? And I was like, well, other countries don't have that. I said, well, we're not other countries.
Yeah, the problem is if you take it away, you say, oh, you're not because you don't look the part. You're not a citizen, even though you might have been born here for 3 generations. Like, oh no, no, you don't look that you don't look the part.
And see, and here's the thing, because like there's this idea of having to be in the United States for multiple generations in order to be for you to become fully American. Because this is something that was told to me by a guy that I dated a while ago. He said he was listening to Ann Coulter. That's your first problem. And and she was having her interview with Vivek Ramaswamy. And one of the things that she said is that she believes that your family should have been here for about 3 to 4 generations for you to become, for you to be considered fully American. So, oh yeah, I should have asked, can I cuss?
Yeah, I'm not monetized, so
Okay,
it
just
doesn't
checking.
matter.
Okay, so I was like, excuse me, but that's bullshit. So you're meaning to tell me, okay, because like here's the thing. Let's apply this argument to those who wrote the Declaration of Independence back in the 1770s. They weren't There was no country. There was no United States at that time. They were they Even though they lived here, and they may have lived here for about, like, their family had lived here for maybe like 100 years or so at that time, a little bit more.
They were
There was
still
no
British.
United States.
They were
They
still British.
were
They
they
were
were
British
British
citizens.
citizens. Yes, they were citizens of the crown. Okay, but they founded the United States, and they're the ones who actually wrote in all these other things. So you're calling them less American? Let's fast forward. Um, I was like, and I was like, well, with that particular logic, then you have to say the same thing about Donald Trump. He said, what do you mean? I said, his mama is an immigrant. His granddaddy on his father's side was an immigrant. His father would have been also an immigrant if he came to the United States, because the only reason why Fred Trump was born in America is because the grandfather got kicked out of Germany because he dodged their draft. After he made his money being a pimp and a restaurant owner in the West, he took his money back to Germany. He was going to, while his wife at the time was pregnant with Fred Trump, and they were going to stay in Germany. But the German government was like, no, you dodged a draft, leave. And that's the reason why they ended up coming back to America, and specifically in New York. So you can say that about him. Then he not fully American.
It's funny how different people like first it was the Irish aren't white enough, or then the Germans aren't enough, then the whatever, like, oh,
Italians
now
and yeah, all this stuff.
now
Yeah,
they're included.
yeah, yeah. I mean, like that's the thing. Like here in American society, we always go through this time period when white supremacy decides to extend whiteness to a group, right? Because remember, it was Irish need not apply, Italians need not apply at one time. You know, Jewish people coming from Eastern Europe at the turn of the century don't apply, right? And then as time went on, Irish people get accepted into whiteness. Italian people get accepted into whiteness. Jewish people, that's Ashkenazi, become accepted into whiteness. That's coming from like European countries. They're getting accepted into whiteness. And, with being accepted into whiteness comes privilege. But the group that at large never had that particular privilege extended to them were African Americans. First off, like the melanin kind of gives it away, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then there's also this other thing that at the inception of this country, Black people were not meant to be citizens. They were not meant to participate fully in the American experiment of democracy. Our place was labor, our place was property, our place was being the shoes of the nation. That's it. You know, and one of the things that has been a precedent that has been set by the United States is that in order for any type of progress to happen, it has to be fought for. Progress never came in the United States without blood. Never. And I mean, it's kind of goofy and sad and crazy that in order for us to be able to create this more perfect union that the Constitution talks about,
Yeah.
um, we have to fight, march, protest, die
Yeah.
in order for those things to happen. It's yeah, yes, I believe strange, but yeah,
Yeah.
but it is but that has been the precedent that has been set here.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, I think sometimes they're hypocrites. Sometimes, like back to the Civil War states' rights thing. You know, they're not very consistent of that because in 2015 when the for a miracle, I guess I call it, the Supreme Court passed the Marriage Act, you know, to let everyone get married.
Yeah.
They're all like, this would be they still let the states decide these things, like when they when they did abortion, repealed that
Mm-hmm.
thing. But then when abortion happened, you know, each state did it, or when states passed marijuana laws, they're like, that's a federal crime.
Yeah. Yeah. It's you know this whole nation is hypocritical.
It's like, well,
Yeah.
it's only states' rights if you agree with me.
I mean, like everything that is built upon is conditional, right? It's like freedom, but conditional. You know, when we looked at what happened to Renee Good and Alex Pretty in Minnesota, and the narrative then, because especially with Alex Pretty having a personal firearm on him, you hear all the people who were these 2A advocates all of a sudden say, "Who brings a gun to a protest?" And you like Kyle Rittenhouse.
Yeah, these are the same people who got mad they couldn't take a gun into Chuck E. Cheese. Like, it's my
Yeah,
right.
yeah,
It's my right to carry this gun into
yeah.
Chuck E.
It's
Cheese.
right. Well, what my Second Amendment rights? I need my Second Amendment rights. You know, and I mean, but you know, but like I said, like a lot of times when you're talking about these rights and privileges that are afforded to Americans through law, it's conditional. The way that, like, you know, depending on who, well, you know, it's mostly like, especially like when it comes to the right, it's like, yes, that's a thing, but it's only a thing um because of the way that we say it's a thing. So if, you know, first, like, you know, we look at Charlie Kirk, and Charlie Kirk, we know, was a big supporter of Second Amendment rights, right? And he even said out of his mouth that if we have more, you know, shootings, then and I'm paraphrasing, I'm willing for there to be more shootings to protect our God-given rights to bear arms. And then you see the way that he goes. And I'm like, karma? But regardless, you know, like, I'm not celebrating the person, people,
Yeah,
somebody dying that way,
yeah,
you know, violently. That's never
yeah.
something that I
Yeah,
celebrate.
but that, I don't know if
But
it's true or not.
you,
I don't know if it's true or not. But I remember this rumor I heard
yeah.
that the guy that shot him thought he wasn't going far enough in his views.
Well, there's so much stuff concerning the guy who shot him, how he shot him. Like the official story is bonkers. Like I to be honest with you, I don't even think that we're really going to even really get the real story, because like apparently his family are right wingers, Trump supporters from Utah,
Yeah.
but he wasn't per se. And the narrative is also that he didn't like the things that Charlie Kirk was saying, especially when it came to gay relationships, and that's why he decided to take matters in his own hands. But
Yeah.
you know,
It's
but
yeah.
but like I mean, like I said, like the story in of itself is just so convoluted. I'm not, even though
Like,
I'm not.
like I
Go
said,
ahead.
there's rumors.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like the stories are so convoluted.
Like
I don't
between
even
like
buy it.
yeah, like I've heard he wasn't going far enough in his hatred and to a trans person shot him. It's both sides, like so far.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, if we ever get to the real truth, it will be a while from now.
But
I
basically,
just
yeah, yeah. So I forget who said it. Who said it? Uh, Brother says as a person he shouldn't have got shot, but he's still a terrible person.
I mean, yeah. I mean, like, like listen, both these could be true at the same time. You can say, I abhor violence and I do not support violence. Full stop. And you can also say that this particular person who had a tragic event happen to him was still a very terrible person. And he was. He said some abysmal, disgusting things. He talked about Black women adversely. He talked about the LGBTQIA plus adversely. He talked about women adversely. He said horrible things about Dr. Martin Luther King. I mean, like, he was a racist. He was a misogynist. He was a bigot, and he was a gun nut. And I mean, like, I don't ever celebrate any person actually being, like, snuffed out that way. I mean, like, I never have. But at the same time, I can still say, like, I don't support the way that you got, that your life ended. But I'm not about to sit up here and pretend like you were an angel, because you definitely were not. And don't come after us just because we said that. It's the truth.
Yeah. So
You
yeah,
know.
like go back to my like you said, slow deconstruction phase and stuff. Like it wasn't until I officially left the church and I started calling myself. I think it was for a while I was calling myself a non-church going Christian. That was my good label for a while.
Yeah, yeah. I would have to say that, for a minute there, I was like that too. I
But
I I
then
call I call myself that as well.
and then I slowly started to see stuff like how like the Westboro people they were acting. They probably did before, but I wasn't really looking. I wasn't really watching them before, and then
Hmm.
how they do this, and then how they were going anti-science, which
Yep.
I didn't really notice before, and then I started noticing these things slowly, and
Yep.
then in 2019, 2020 and stuff, when for the longest time, I always thought anti-vaxxers were on the left side, in the far left side, you know. But
Oh
all
no.
of a sudden, here comes the church people going, vaccines are evil and stuff, and all this stuff.
Yeah.
Like
I had a really good friend that was, that we were part of the same Christian groups, like in college, right? And after we graduated and, had our own lives, and she got married and had a family, and I remember going to visit her one day, and she told me that she decided with her third kid not to get him vaccinated. And I said, why? And she said, because my first two kids, are on the spectrum. And one, her middle kid is more, on the spectrum as far as like, their behaviors concerning like, autism than the
Mhm.
first one. However, through treatment and speak and therapy and different things like that, a lot of them are doing a lot better. And but the third kid is not on the spectrum, at least not as as deeply as the first two children that she had, right?
Mhm.
And so she told me that, well, he doesn't have autism, and the reason being is because I never got him vaccinated. And I was like, what? Where did you get the idea that autism causes vaccines? And because like at this particular point, I was not fully aware of some of the arguments against vaccines because of because of autism, right? And and then like she hit me with the first one that is all widely said is that, you know, when more vaccines or vaccine schedules got changed for kids, that you would see a higher diagnosis rate of autism. And of course, I love the counter argument that, you will often hear is like, well, when it's warm, uh, people have who happen to eat more happen to eat more ice cream. But another thing that happens is that shark attacks happen to be uh, happen to go up at that particular time too. So does that mean that because more people eat ice cream around this particular time period, that that's the cause of shark attacks being more prevalent?
They can sense the ice. They can sense ice cream in your body. They can
Right,
smell it.
exactly. Right. I sense Neapolitan. I'm coming after you. You know, and I mean, but we know that's absurd. I be like, shark attacks are going to be higher during a certain time period, like ice cream eating is going to be higher during a certain time period. More people in the summer are going to head to places like beaches and things of that nature
Yeah.
where you actually have like where sharks live. So
And
yeah,
30 years ago, a lot of people even when we were growing up, a lot of people didn't even know about autism spectrum that well. It was
yeah,
they was diagnosed that as much as it is now.
yeah, exactly. So and I mean, and that's the thing, like, you know they said, well, there's more people with autism than therefore because like we have more vaccines. I was like, okay, it's basically just goes down to the whole thing about correlation does not equal causation. At 20, 30 years ago, as you just said, we knew less about autism. I don't even think 20, 30 years ago that we even looked at autism as a spectrum. That's a more recent inception. And the reason why it's a more recent inception is because you start to change how you diagnose and how you treat certain things when you get more information. And that comes from research and study. I mean, like, and then the same thing even with when you're looking at vaccines. They said, well, we didn't have as many vaccines 20 to 30, 40 years ago than we do now. I said, of course we didn't. I was like, first off,
Like,
viruses were not discovered until 1899.
yeah, it's funny. It's funny. Like I think me and you, like we missed the chickenpox vaccine by a few years.
We did. Yeah, we did. Exactly. I mean, yeah, my son who's yeah, he got the chickenpox vaccine. I didn't. And oh my God, and I had
Yeah,
bad chickenpox.
I was 4 or 5 when I got mine, but yeah, like it was like 5 years, 6 years later, like 90, somewhere in the 90s, I think that's when they finally brought it out.
Yeah, exactly. So like, and by that time, like I remember getting the chickenpox when I was like as a young kid in the 80s. There was no chickenpox vaccine. You know, I mean, like it was basically a condition that you just had to ride out. You know, And that's what you did in the 80s. Like, you knew that at one point in your life that you was going to come home one day with a whole bunch of bumps and sores on your body. You just gonna have to deal with it. You're gonna have to take oatmeal baths. You got to drink soup, and you can't go nowhere. And when you wash your body and you wash your hair, you got to do it like very slowly, because sometimes those things are going to start coming off in the tub. It was something that was accepted in life. Fast forward, about, I would say, like, I think that, like, I don't know specifically when the chickenpox vaccine was available, but I knew that it had to be at least about 10 to 15 years after I had it. So I mean, like when you get a chance to study diseases and study how these particular viruses behave in bodies, then you can, formulate treatments in order for you to combat it. And that's exactly what happened with chickenpox. That's what happened with HIV. That's what happened with smallpox. That's
Yeah,
what
yeah.
happened,
Yeah, I have a friend who's anti, not anti, pro vaccine or whatever, because her mom literally has polio.
See, see, and I mean, like, and remember when the polio vaccine came out, there was no choice. You didn't get this informed consent decree type stuff back in the day. You took it. They were going into schools, into community centers, into anywhere where they can get to them kids. And the only thing that was done was sent a letter home to the parent and say, hey, on this day, your child will be shot with a polio vaccine. And you know what? The only thing that you could do was comply, because you had no choice. It was a federal government effort in order for them to be able to vaccinate as many children as possible when it came to polio. And I really believe that a big push of reason for that is because Franklin Delano Roosevelt had polio, and that's how he lost his ability to be able to walk. He was paralyzed because of polio. So, and think about, like, how many children
And
is
he was,
saved.
yeah, Roosevelt was one of the lucky ones, because he did the iron lung, the iron lung thing. He was like one of the fewer lucky ones.
Yes, he was. He was a few lucky ones. I think a lot of it also had that, that his family was extremely wealthy. But so he was able to get, better care than most. I mean, but, like, just think about it. Like, he contracts polio, and he, necessarily didn't have to go again to Ireland, and he didn't lose his life. I mean, he was an older person by the time that he, left the earth, and we said peace out. But, you know, all these kids who were more susceptible to becoming infected by this particular awful, dreadful disease are now, you know, inoculated against it, to the point where we were giving it generation by generation, to the point where we just about got to the point where it was eradicated. Same thing with measles, same thing with mumps, same thing with rubella. And now, because we have these quacks around us that are now in power, that is having doubts when it comes to vaccines, and peddling their doubts to the masses, that we're seeing a resurgence of a lot of these particular diseases that we damn near got rid of because of vaccines. And I mean, just think about it. Every epidemic or pandemic that we had that was quelled as a society were mostly done by vaccines.
Yeah, it's funny. Yeah, during the 2020 thing, talking about relaxing stuff. Like
Mhm.
I had no idea. Like the bird pandemic happened in Obama's time and stuff,
Yep.
or Bush's time, because we were, our thing was acting normally. We acted like we had a plan. We acted on it and stuff. So I had no idea that was a thing happening.
I mean,
But
I remember specifically how the bird flu was in the news and how it was an issue. But well, one of the things that we had under Bush and also under Obama is a pandemic response office that was within it was in their administrations. So these are smart people who have studied this type of stuff, who were who believed and actually acted in the way of science. I'm sorry, words are escaping me right now. And they were able to respond correctly and properly to this issue when it came to bird flu, to the point where it wasn't like a pandemic that was that was felt all around the world, that we basically had to shut everything down like we did when it came to SARS-CoV-2, COVID-19. you know and remember, like, one of the first things that happened in Trump's first administration is he got rid of that response office. And then look what happened.
Another thing is, people talking about how it can't be trusted because it was made so fast. They made it so fast to can't be trusted, and now I know that we've been saying this for years, but still, I was like, 20 years ago, my first PC had like a 5 GB hard drive, and I thought the 5 GB hard drive was so much space. 5 GB
Mhm.
of space. I was like, oh my god, that's so much space. 5 GB. That's a lot. Now it's like barely,
Right. You got
barely
more on
after
your
my
phone.
phone. My phone, 5 GB my phone can barely do anything.
Right. And I be like, like, so I've heard, that argument too, like, especially like people who really like have a tendency to kind of lean into conspiracy theories. And one of the things that my mom did for a living is that she was a lab technician, first for the University of Illinois at Chicago, and then at the University of Chicago hospitals. And I think that she said, I don't know if it was when she was at the University of Chicago or when she was at U of I, but part part of her career path as time went on is actually working with doctors who studied mRNA and mRNA delivery systems when it came to how to deliver vaccines. and and the thing about it is that when it came to mRNA technology, I mean, by the time that they introduced it, to work with COVID-19, mRNA technology was already in use and studied and researched for over 30 years. The only thing that they did was to take this technology when it came to delivery systems concerning vaccines, and they just applied it to the COVID virus. I mean, like, because they already had that research in place. And then they said, well, it came out so fast. I said, well, yeah, because this technology has been around for a very long time. And he said, well, they didn't study it. I said, no, they had clinical trials. They did. And another thing they also had is that the clinical trials that they were doing with Pfizer and with Moderna and with I forgot the other one that had like a less prevalent a less
Johnson Johnson.
Johnson and Johnson, yeah, Jans, and there was one more, but they had their research, their clinical trials available online without a paywall. You can look it up yourself, and and it's it's so funny. I think about how, if we remember when you were talking previously about, like, this hypocritical mindset and hypocritical society that we happen to be in, especially when it comes to the right. So you would hear people who, especially with conspiracy theories, who lean more right, and you say, okay, well, these studies and the research that they did is available for you to read on your own without a paywall, right? You can go to it, you can read exactly what they did, all this other great stuff, and they'll tell you, oh, Well, they just, that doesn't stop them from making things up in order for us to convince us to take this vaccine.
Yeah, you can tell during the pandemic. There's two types of church people goers, like the ones that stayed home and did church via Zoom or
Yep.
Skype, and the people who like went anyways and screw the 6 feet thing. We're going to can't
Right.
stop us.
Right. And I mean, and we saw the difference in mortality when, you had people who were saying that God will protect me, but now they end up 6 feet under. Mm. I mean, like, my mom was a Zoom goer. She would ask for help. Could you please set this up? I want to, watch church. I was like, sure. I mean, by that time I was very much so a start atheist, but hey, I mean, but how I came to my conclusions are completely on my own. I'm
Yeah,
not
like
a
they said, so, it's like
atheist evangelist.
like some pastors were like, okay, like we're gonna trust the government and do this. That it was like Copeland, whatever, or other people
Yeah, like Kenneth
like
Copeland. Yeah,
like
yeah,
big.
yeah. Like,
We're still gonna have big outside ceremonies, inside things.
I mean, like, and like, here's the thing, like, he was like one of the main ones that was like pushing it against, like, this whole thing of concerning not being able to go to church, and he thought that because he did a prayer with his buddies and he blew COVID away, that's going to all of a sudden make the difference. And he wasn't the only one. Greg Locke was, he ended
But
up,
yeah, that's the other one. Walk
yeah, yeah, Greg Locke, his
like
crazy ass.
aren't they the same people? Aren't they the same people who treat the president as the second coming of God?
Yeah, and see, and that's the thing, like, so, like, they'll tell you these are the same people who, if you say, hey, the research for COVID-19 mRNA vaccines is available in online, no paywall, right? You can read it yourself and you can see exactly what they did in order for them to come up with these particular vaccines. And then they'll tell you some bullshit about, oh, they could have made that up. They just want us to, they just want us to be part of the deep state and whatever the fuck they say, right? And then we turn around and we get to something called the Epstein files. And then and then, like, we finally got what? We only got like 3 million pages so far that has been released, and the majority of those pages have been redacted heavily, right? And then you would have those same people who would tell you some mess like that about that information being available without a paywall, and they'll read through the Epstein files, and when there are like some credible, even though, like, I understand that not every piece of information that's on there, especially that implicates Trump, is, implicating him to do something specifically that,
But
against, like, little girls. But here's the thing, but, like, they'll completely glance over some credible credible things that happen to be there about what he probably could have done, and would come up with the craziest excuses on why he would be completely exonerated and innocent of any of those particular actions.
it's also funny. It's funny. My biggest one is like, they're like, what will happen if your guy was on it? Well, if he's on it, and you're like, arrest him.
Yeah,
like,
arrest him. Go
like,
to we don't. I be like, look, we listen.
I might like Clinton. I like Clinton in the '90s, but if he's a pedophile, arrest him.
I mean, like, I didn't like Clinton. I did, what I'm saying? Like, one of the things that he decimated social safety net programs, especially when it comes to, getting cutting people off of welfare without them being ever recourse. So I don't particularly care for him all that much. But I mean, but just because he a Democrat don't necessarily mean that I'm gonna hold water for him. If you guilty, you guilty. Period. I mean, like, it doesn't matter. I don't care what political leanings that you have. If you have done some essay against children, you should be arrested. You need to be go to trial. You need to have yourself investigated. And if you are found liable for these particular things and you have been convicted, you need to go to jail. Period.
like Clinton was impeached for having or lying about having sex. That,
Yeah.
that's not half of what as bad as what Trump's done so far.
Right. Yeah. I mean, like, Yeah, I mean, like, started a whole war without congressional consent, made billions of dollars off of the office of the president, which is against the emoluments clause. He, um, he started to hold up funding when it came to certain programs and different things like that was already appropriated through for Congress. That's
That's not
not
even,
his job.
and
His,
that's not that, and that's not even counting the riot he made in 2020.
Right. I mean, like, oh yes. Oh, and let's not forget, try to basically create a whole coup d'etat of the government back on January 6th of 2021. Can we not forget these things? I mean, like, so that's why I say, like, we got a problem here. We have such a problem here because the problem that we have is that we got way too many ideas of who we're going to allow like rules to be bent for and who we won't, you
Yeah.
know and I mean, and like, and to be honest, like, I don't know what magic dust Donald Trump specifically has, that he has literally got folk that has been blinded by his rhetoric. But I know that a lot of it is imploring dog whistles and misogyny and racism that has already
Yeah.
been there. But
Yeah.
but him specifically.
Yeah. Like when Trump's ju- oh, thinking of justices like that. Like it's also ironically funny when Obama was leaving office, the guy said you can't have a Supreme Court justice when you guys leaving office. When Trump's
Right.
leaving office, like got everyone as soon as we can, as soon as we
Yeah,
can.
right, exactly. Mitch McConnell refused to do a confirmation hearing for Merrick Garland because he said that uh, Obama was a lame duck president. I said it doesn't matter. Like, you're supposed to do a confirmation. I mean, if that's the case, this president is a lame duck president. So why are we doing oversight and also confirmation hearings for any person that he actually nominates for positions? We I mean,
But
like, with that same type of logic, then that's the case for this guy too.
but it was his 3 or 4. I forget how many people he got in the Supreme Court, but it was that people got that overturned the Roe versus Wade
Roe v.
thing.
Wade, right?
It made
Because
states.
he got Neil Gorsuch, Brett Kavanaugh, Amy Coney Barrett, and I think I want to say I want to say one more, but I know those three specifically. That he
That overturned the balance.
that yeah that
But
overturned the balance, that in order for them to overturn Roe v. Wade.
and then Ohio was until we passed a law they're trying to overturn it again. Like Ohio, we the same day we ran voting rights for both abortion and marijuana in Ohio on the same election.
Oh, really?
But, yeah,
Interesting.
free pro-choice abortion, pro-choice smoking. But anyways, before that happened, I remember we were making the news because of that 10-year-old or 10 or 11-year-old. They couldn't get an abortion.
Yes.
She had to
Yes.
move out. She had to go out of state because
Right.
she was
She had to go to
she got
Indiana
raped.
by her
She
mom's
got raped or something.
boyfriend.
What
Hmm.
her mom's boyfriend or something like that.
Her mom, yes, she was 10 years old. She was essayed specifically by her mother's boyfriend. And when she was got pregnant, she, because of Ohio's abortion ban, she had to go to Indiana, because this is before Indiana put theirs in place, and
Yeah, like
that's where
it's
she
like
got her abortion. Yep.
it's like she's 10. She still works. Some 10-year-olds still are in car seats.
You remember what Charlie Kirk said, right? He said that if he had a daughter, and if the same thing happened to her, he would make her have a baby.
Like when, like I said, yeah, I know. Like when both a mom and a kid need a car seat, something's not right here.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, like, The same thing happened to another. It was a little black girl that was assaulted by a stranger in Mississippi. And of course, the whole reason why Roe v. Wade was overturned is because of the Dobbs decision, and the epicenter of where that happened was in Mississippi. And the little girl was like, I think she was 12 at the time. By the time that she had the child, she was 13 years old. She hadn't even left middle school yet. And and what ended up happening was is that she was outside in the backyard making TikTok videos, dancing. And she ended up, and then a stranger came and just assaulted her. And when it was found out that she was pregnant, because she didn't know what was going on, she just knew that she was starting to feel bad. And so when her mother took her to the doctor and they tested her and all this other stuff and found out that she was pregnant, the first thing that the nurse said when they found out was, "What have you been doing?" And I'm like, why does that have to be your default to this little child, that she did something wrong in order for her to be in the state that she's in right now? And now her whole childhood has been basically taken away from her, because the nearest place that she could have went in order for her to get an abortion was Chicago. And her mother did not have the funds to drive up, to go 9 hours driving to Chicago, stay overnight in order, and then also pay for a procedure and then come back to Mississippi. So this child has to, who is a child, has to raise a child
Yeah, a lot of
by
times it's done medically. If you have a kid at younger age, your body can recover from that.
I
From your,
mean, and also too, like according to Mississippi, they make an exception for rape and incest, but in her case, they denied it.
was it because she was black?
A lot of it is because she's black. I mean, like, Mississippi is like one of the poorest states in the union. It has, and it's and as far as like the state population, it has most concentrated black people in that particular area. And of course, like Mississippi has a very long, pervasive, disgusting history of institutionalized racism in that particular state. But yeah, and I mean, like, and I just found it, like, ironic when they had brought the suit against this women's center that was specifically in Mississippi. The majority of their clientele that they served were black women. That's not a coincidence, of course.
Yeah. So going back to your channel, that was the thing we talked about so far. How does your channel help fight all this stuff?
Awareness is mostly where I land. Matter of fact, I just did a story. I posted it today, well, this morning, about how this week is Black Maternal Health Awareness Week. And there was a story that recently came out from Georgia, where there are currently midwives that are suing the state, for because they have the most stringent laws against midwifery, without them being able to practice clinical care for the patients that they are supposedly caring for, when it comes to pregnant people, right? And and we already know, well, if you did not know, that first off, maternal health, and especially when it comes to maternal mortality, infant and maternal mortality rates in America is the highest amongst all the developed world. And specifically, Black women are 3 times more likely to die during childbirth than white women. And a lot of it is because of the same issues that we experience through institutionalized racism, especially in healthcare. There's this idea of Black women don't feel pain. They're ignored a lot, especially when they're saying that they're having a problem. I mean, like, I even told a story about, like, how a similar issue happened to me when I was pregnant years ago. And so there has been this push to add doulas and midwives to the care team of people who happen to be pregnant, in order for them to get more attention and more care, so that they can have a more successful birth, and also less likely to possibly be pushed into cesarean section of C-sections, which happens more often to Black women than white women. So, when I talk about stories like that, they're, in order for people to be aware that these things are happening, because, like, especially like what we're seeing from this administration is an overt, um an attack against information, like,
Yeah, like
right
for yeah,
information.
like an example, I heard a lot of people think people in their eighth or eighth or ninth month of pregnancy get abortions for fun. Like, if they kept the
Yeah,
baby that long, they wanted to have the baby. But they
right.
have to. They have to. It's a medical reason. They have to. They're not like, oh, I'm 9 months pregnant. Let's get aborted. Like, let's get
Yeah.
abortion.
Yeah, like that doesn't happen. I mean, like, you even heard like some people who say, oh, they've been a you even had some cases where women aborted a baby after it was born. I like, no, that's called murder.
Like
That
saying like
that's
they if they kept it that long, they wanted to have it.
right. They wanted to have
But
the baby, but
but
I mean,
medically they can't because
right. I
for
mean,
some
like,
reason.
if you know that, I mean, like, but see, but that's the reason why, like, a lot of these, like, when, especially like when you look at what happened specifically with Roe v. Wade, is so dangerous, because abortions were just like a procedure that people got just because they wanted to practice some type of birth control. No, oftentimes it wasn't just because they didn't, they had an unwanted pregnancy. Sometimes it was medically necessary in order for them to stop, to stop the pregnancy, because the life of the mother was in danger. I mean, like, ectopic pregnancies are a thing, and they're very common. If you have a fetus developing in a fallopian tube, there is zero chance that that fetus is going to survive. Zero chance. And a lot of times, what ends up happening is, like, if that fetus stays into that fallopian tube so very long, then infections can set in, especially for the mother, and it could be a danger for her life as well.
And they can
So
and they're not able to have a baby in the future if that happened.
that
Like,
and that has been the case. There have been reports specifically coming out of Texas where that was the case. This one woman talked about how she had an ectopic pregnancy. She was not allowed to have an abortion in Texas. She ended up developing sepsis, and she almost died, and now she's barren. She can't have kids. Just because she was denied that portion that she should have gotten for health. So I talk about a lot of these different things. Of course, like, I talk about women's issues. I heavily talk about African American issues. I talk about politics as a whole. I talk about, marginalized groups, and the reason being is because, you know I don't like this idea that if we're living here, that we're supposed to live in this vacuum, and then if shit is like on fire all around us, that we're supposed to hold our hands to our ears and go la 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 la, and it'll
yeah,
get better.
back to going back to the lost cause thing. Uh,
Yeah.
uh, we we have a narrow view of history and stuff, so we don't
Hmm.
know the full picture, like, of the world, or even our own country sometimes.
Yeah.
This happened, this happened, this happened. That's all you need to know.
Right, exactly. And I mean, like, and also too, like, I try to have a wide variety of conversations, especially like when I invite guests on. Um I had a really good stream a couple weeks ago, with the Amish misfit and a friend of theirs, who both, you know are ex-Amish people, and we talked about the Amish, their relationship when it comes to race, and also their relationship of their participation in American colonialism. It was such a great conversation. And I mean, like, a lot of times, like, how many Black people do you know who have like YouTube channels that's going to talk to ex Amish people? Well, I am, you know, because those things are interesting. And like I said, it goes back to this idea of like people groups that have been here for centuries and have also contributed to how society functions now. And so, like, oftentimes, if we got to go back to, you know, the foundation of a thing in order for us to understand why does this tree look like the way it is now, we got to go
Yeah.
back to the root.
Yeah, and like also information like earlier, like I always thought Ohio as a northern state, was like that. But all of a sudden, I hear in the last 10, 15 years, all these Confederate flags and pro-Confederate views in
Mhm.
Ohio. I'm like, what that happened? We're the Union state. We were like, when did we see all pro-Confederate?
Yeah.
I was like,
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's interesting because, like, you know, people like automatically just think like a red state is in the South, and we got red states in the North, we got red states in the West. We, you know, I mean, you know, come on now. I mean, like, and I mean, like, as many times as people have the ability to migrate, they also have the ability to take a lot of these particular attitudes with them where they go. You know?
like the what was it? I had my channel last year. We talked about the what was it called, the Southern Switch or the Party Switch.
Yes, 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 yes. You know, that's a very favorite topic of mine. Because a lot of times, especially when recently Amber Rose and Nick Cannon had a conversation on his podcast, and Amber was talking about how Democrats do not like Black people, and
It started the KKK.
yeah, right, yeah, that's Nick Cannon said, well, they were the party of the KKK, and I was like, oh my god.
Yes, they
I mean,
were.
like, yes, they were. I mean, but like I
100
said, but this,
100 years ago.
yeah, I mean, like I said, but the story does not stop there. I mean, like, you know, and to be honest, like, a lot of people like looked only to after Lyndon B. Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act in 1964 that was catalyst that, you know, started the party switch. Actually, it wasn't. The party switch started during Roosevelt. You know, after Roosevelt got into office in 1933 and started pushing and enacting, like, you know, the New Deal. At first, the only people who could, you know, access a lot of, like, you know, like the workers program and some of the other social safety nets that came up were only white people. Eleanor Roosevelt pushed him to extend those extend some of those social safety net programs to African Americans, because at first he didn't, and because you start to see him conceding to his wife and started to open up the door, even if it was a sliver, to allow, like, you know, Black men to start being able to participate in the workers program. Then, you know, because Franklin Delano Roosevelt um, was a Democrat, and he was pushing these woke liberal agenda item things, you know, onto the general public. How dare he? You started seeing people who were like Dixiecrats and who were within that
Yeah,
particular realm,
like
and the Democratic Party start to switch to Republican.
yeah, like I forget his name, but there's a Democrat in 2004. I think the convention. There's this Democrat speaking at the Republican convention.
Yeah, I forgot who that was.
Yeah,
I
but
gotta look that up.
Yeah, I
But yeah,
remember
I
because
remember. I know you. I know you talking right. Yeah, because like they're
he's like I wish I could challenge you to a duel to when the
I
NBC
challenge you
host.
to do it. I wanna.
But
I almost want to say that was Howard Dean. That's what I want to say, but don't quote me.
I think I think the name was Miller.
Okay.
I think it was looking back Zell Miller maybe.
Um. You know what? I'm about to look it up.
But yeah, I remember that he was a Democrat. He was at the Republican convention.
Okay. It was. Yeah, you're right. Zell Miller, Senator Zell Miller of Georgia. He delivered the keynote address at the 2004 Republican National Convention. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like, and you know, like we even look at like people who happen to be part of the Democratic Party today that might as well call themselves a Republican because that's the way that they vote. A prime example is John Fetterman in the Senate. 9.9% of the time out of 10, he's voting with the Republicans on measures.
So what's your opinion? I think I think it was called the some kind of window thing. You ever heard that before?
What do you mean?
Like I think what it's called, but like I heard people say people who might have been conservative 50 years ago would be
Hmm.
liberal to today's standards.
That's interesting, and I mean, like, I think that what's very unique about today is that conservatism, if we look at, let's say, 50 years ago versus here, was more so a an idea of like certain values that one would hold that basically, just like solidified yourself in, like, the white zeitgeist, right?
Mhm.
um and because we didn't 50 years ago, 50, 60 years ago, there was there was not the progress that we have garnered, especially after the civil rights movement, um that what we see now, especially with the right trying to hold on to power for dear life, is more radicalism, um, when it comes to the ideals and how they're supposed to practice it, and especially when we're looking at people specifically in power right now that's trying to roll back a lot of the progressive things that have happened because, again, as we talked about before, people fought for it. So in that particular aspect, the, it would it's those people would not necessarily be the same. But I would argue this, and I think that we wouldn't really know is, unless we took a person who had these conservative ideas and then put them in today, how they would lean.
Yeah, true.
We really, I mean, because, like, to be honest, after every person that I have spoken to that used to be a conservative, more right wing, including my executive producer of The Roots Matter, it was through deconstructing as a Christian and actually learning more history that changed their mind concerning about the things that they used to believe in versus now,
Yeah,
especially when it came to being right wing.
yeah. You ever heard that saying? I don't know who's made it. I would say like you're a liberal when you're 20s, but when you're old, you're right winger, and like I think I've gotten more as I get older. I got more left.
Oh yeah, I know I have. I know I have. Like, and then I'll give you an example. I mean, I've never been conservative per se, but I did have more conservative leanings when I was a Christian. I I did not believe that marriage could exist outside of a man and a woman. I did believe that, people who happen to be practicing same sex relationships were We're going against the Bible and going against God's notions, and therefore they can endanger themselves to possibly go to hell if they didn't, get saved, they didn't, change their mind or whatever. Um, and so I had those particular ideas, but as time went on, the older that I got, the more I started to learn, and the less religious I became,
Yeah,
the more
and it's
left I became.
yeah, and also they're also different. I always I didn't really care as much. I like like I didn't really fight for the rights, but I didn't really oppose them either. I was like,
Oh, you were
neutral.
lukewarm.
Yeah, I
God
was
would have
neutral.
spewed you out of his mouth.
I was like I don't care. I don't care about gay people, but I'm not gonna fight against them either.
Yeah,
But yeah,
yeah.
it's different. When uh when my niece came out,
Mm.
things changed because then you have family members. Then once people start attacking your family members, people you love, then that sometimes you start getting a little bit more aggressive.
Yeah. Yeah, and I even remember it was a niece of mine when she started school and she started to take classes concerning gender roles and started to educate me. I pushed back hard. I was like, no, that's not true. No, that's not the case. Yada yada yada. And then I listened to her more, and I decided to go ahead and study more about the social construct of gender, and like race, we've been placed into these particular roles, um, not because it's scientifically feasible. It's because that's how society basically created the
Yeah,
roles that men and women and what have you supposed to
yeah.
hold to,
Like
and a lot of that is rooted in misogyny and patriarchy.
my niece got married my niece is almost married for 2 years now. I went to her. I went to her I went to her like reception wedding. But it's like if Ohio, if they ever if the Supreme Court ever overthrows the 2015 thing, I don't know what Ohio's stance was. So I don't know if they had if her right to be violated as soon as if they ever passed that, like abortion happened.
Hmm.
When when Roe versus Wade happened, Ohio's like abortion legal again. So I don't know if I forget what Ohio's stance was on gay marriage before that happened. So I don't know if she has to get divorced or whatever if they ever got overthrown.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, like, it's hard to say what would happen if the Obergefell um, decision was overturned, and I know that's one of the reasons why um, under under Biden they were pushing to create and get signed into law a marriage protection for that very reason, to say, okay, now that we have the Burgersfeld um, decision, we're going to actually write and pass a law so that we can solidify marriage equality as law in the United States. I don't think it passed, but but when you think about, like, a lot of the decisions that came down from the Supreme Court, even if it was like something that was a good thing, it's it's going to be it's tenuous as best, because there's nothing to say that another court would come along and overturn that decision. Roe v. Wade is a perfect example, because we did not codify abortion into law at the federal level. I know that there has been, the people who have tried, but it never came to pass. We are dealing with this now. We're dealing with, higher mortality and infant and maternal mortality rates because of the trigger laws that have gone and that have been passed in other states, where abortion protections are not there, and instead it's only abortion bans. So, and one of the things that I said in my video that I did today is that I don't think that people completely understand is how when you have a patriarchal, misogynist, racist institutions that are in place and they're not checked, it can actually be deadly. It because the people that they affect are going to be the ones who are going to be marginalized. They're going to
Yeah.
be the ones who are poor. They're because they don't have they're not going to have that the guys of like having like a lot of money and things of that nature and being adjacent to wealth in order for the state not to punish in some shape way or form if they happen to fall into these particular categories, unfortunately.
Yeah, I forget exactly the time frame. I think it was 50, 60 years between Brown for Sports Education and Plessy Ferguson. That 60-year gap, I think,
Yeah.
between they called uh, separate but equal.
Yes, right. Yeah, Plessy versus Ferguson is separate but equal. But separate was never equal. I mean, because like you can't have, and even though like there is a philosophical debate that one can have as far as like black positionality ever since like integration had became a thing. That's no show. That's a whole nother show. But but the but the but the point specifically when we go from Plessy versus Ferguson was that what was supposed to happen is that you were going to have separate facilities, but they're going to be equal because they're going to be treated and taken care of the same way.
They
Schools and bathrooms, waiting areas, all these are different things, but that never was the case. Everything that was considered colored was subpar.
and like I there's stories about how there was school the buses take the white people picked up, but the black kids had to walk a mile or two to their school.
Yeah, they and then like a lot of times in some of these schools where mostly black kids went, the you be in the seventh grade reading the third grade book, you know so they did not have equal access to even like when it came to curriculum and educational materials. So and some people like, well, um that whole idea concerning black folks are not as smart, and well, and eugenics said it's because of nature, but we know that that's again bullshit. If if our schools had same books, same teacher training, same facilities where they're safe, like a lot of these schools also too where like the kids, what black kids were going to were dangerous, they were unsafe, the their infrastructure was crumbling, falling apart because they were not getting maintained like the white schools were. Yet the black people who were living in those particular areas still had to pay property taxes and taxes in order to maintain the white schools that they were not allowed to go to. So you can't have facilities and knowing good and goddamn well that these other facilities are not maintained properly and say that, oh, but they're equal. No, they are not. They're not. And it's basically just saying like, hey, if I'm paying taxpayer money, I go to work every day, you taking money out of my fucking paycheck in order for it to go to these particular institutions and things that we need like schools and waiting areas and yada 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 and transportation, all this other great stuff that you want to do, then I should have access to that as well. Hello. you know yeah.
Like again, information. A lot of people, some people, a lot of people don't even know what happened in the '60s. Now they've they're like, oh, they're like, no big deal. Whatever that was in the '60s happened. What like we don't know what's about what that, but how they had to bring the National Guard to let people go to school.
Yeah, that the story, one of them, they had the Little Rock Nine. which was basically these non African American children who were trying to they were integrating the schools, and what ended up happening was is that they were basically met with violence by uh, the neighboring people, whether if they were like white students and also their parents and other white people that happened to be around them. And the National Guard had to come down. I believe at that particular time was sent by John F. Kennedy in
Was it
order
Kennedy
for
or was it Eisenhower?
it was well, Eisenhower had to do it. Kennedy had to do it too. Matter of fact, his brother, Robert Kennedy Sr., not the
The,
child,
the,
Bobby.
yeah, the one that was a little bit smarter than the anti-vaxxers. Son.
Exactly. Yeah, Bobby
Yeah,
Kennedy.
I heard he's like a black sheep of the family now.
Oh, he should be. I mean, like, especially like when you think about like the Kennedy legacy versus this guy is, but that's yeah,
Yeah.
but like, um, Robert Kennedy, Bobby Kennedy had to convince John Kennedy to send the National Guard because, like, at the time, like, um, Bobby was the Attorney General under his brother, and when they were starting to I know that, like, under Eisenhower, that's when, like, 1954 is when Plessy versus I'm sorry, Brown versus the Board of Education said separate is not equal, and therefore all these places had to be integrated. I mean, like, you had from the 50s up until the time that John F. Kennedy was elected, they were still, integrating schools
They are very
throughout the
slow. About it. They are very
yeah,
slow about it because it
they were.
happened in the
They I
50s
mean,
and 60s were, and because the 60s when Martin Luther King happened, that was almost 10 years
yeah,
later.
yeah, I mean, but like, so like, you had Brown versus the Board of Education that was ratified, and or that decision came out between 54 55. The civil rights movement, actually, they said the inception of the civil rights movement was the lynching of Emmett Till. And that's when you started to see people organize. And then we had what happened with Rosa Parks, and then you saw the massive or organizing of the Montgomery bus boycott. And then there was the Freedom Riders, and all these were starting to take place after between 1955 on. And then John F. Kennedy becomes president, um, and people were looking at him mostly to say that, okay, well, like, a lot of these different things that during the civil rights movement that people are fighting for, we can probably get legislation after off from him. And actually, he was not a huge fan of signing legislation like the Civil Rights Act of
It
1960.
was his Southern vice president that did it most of it.
Yes, yes. I mean, but it was after, of course, he was assassinated. But like, when it came to being more progressive, and especially when it came to protecting these kids when they were integrating the schools, a lot of that was at the behest of Bobby Kennedy pushing his brother to send the National Guard into the South. And because remember, it was Connors, Bull Connors, governor in the South. I don't know if he from Georgia,
Arkansas.
Alabama. I
I
think
think it was Arkansas.
well, he was the one that said segregation now, segregation.
Oh yeah, yeah, oh yeah. That
Yeah,
different.
that was Bull Connors. But I forgot which. I think he was governor of Alabama, but he's the segregation now, segregation forever, and that was in complete defiance to integration after the Supreme Court decision for Brown versus the Board of Education. They were like, I know the court said this, but basically we're gonna stick our middle finger up to the court and we're gonna do what we want to do because here we segregate, right?
like
And
like like when the kind of like when the Supreme Court said they couldn't remove the Indians from Georgia, and Jackson was like, "I'll do it anyways."
basically, yes, exactly. Exactly. I mean, like, but even think about like, we have plenty of like people that happen to be in like elected officials that ignore Supreme Court orders. Like, it's not like the Supreme Court has like a has their own way of enforcing what they say. I mean, like they basically go off of the good faith of like the federal government to enact certain things to happen in order for them to.
Back when the balance of power mattered.
Yeah, back when checks and balances actually mattered. Yes, yes, that's that they go by that. But but we see. I mean, and especially like when you looked at like how many times have the courts shot down something this guy did? So many times, you know. And I mean like, and just ignore those court orders. I mean like you even had the point where the Supreme Court said that you cannot deport Abrego, I think Garcia Abrego Garcia. You can't deport him. He needs to, you can't just like send people out of the country without due process. And I mean like, and people were holding their breath to see if he was actually going to comply with the Supreme Court. And that was a unanimous decision. I mean, like, I was like, well, at least they agree that, due process is something that's supposed to be actually
Yeah, because
afforded to everybody in the United States, not just a
I think
few.
that's what I think that was one of the main things that happened. I think that at least that was the what's the word I'm looking for? Hope, at least, that
Hmm.
having the Supreme Court people being life sentences would mean that they could rise above political means. Like just because a Republican violent means I always vote Republican.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, like, it's got to be the point. You know what? I mean, like, I understand, like, there's this whole back and forth when it comes to politics. And I used to have a friend that used to say that politics is no, government is the game and politics is how you play it. And unfortunately, that's how we've done politics. It's a game. And and I wish above all things we could get to the point where politics stops becoming how to move your chess pieces and really say we should do this because it's the right thing to do. You know, like you know how like you look at Zoran Maldani, who becoming mayor of New York, and he's actually keeping his promises that he made to his to the people that the people of New York that he wanted to do. I mean, like, he fixed a bunch of the potholes. He worked on a plan to, to freeze to the rent in these in tenant control areas. And now he is working towards universal child care in New York City. Something that a lot of people say, oh, it couldn't be done. And he's also put in a plan to tax the rich.
Also, uh, like I think we made that joke. Somebody joke about the new rifle happening. How two child molester supporters are fighting each other now, the Pope and the President.
Yeah, that's something, ain't it? I mean, well, to be fair, we don't have any credible evidence that Pope Leo was ever a molester, but we do
But
know a whole bunch of priests were.
the Catholic Church in general. But yeah, it's like
Yeah, I have a tendency to be more on Pope Leo's side. He's from the South Side of Chicago, so am I. He's a Sox fan. I
like
mean,
the first
I
one.
was more of a Cubs fan, but I fucks with the Sox at
Oh,
time to times. He likes,
oh, I got,
he likes the
but
pizza.
but yeah, the first American Pope, like, and like basic, but he said something about the president, so now he's Republican number one.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I just thought it was funny when Trump said to him, he's weak on crime. I was like, uh, so there's like this big crime. Well, I mean, like, now I have said, and I have agreed with another person who used to be on YouTube a lot, who said that like, the Catholic Church is the number one crime, the biggest crime syndicate in the world. And I said, I agree. But I mean, but like, I don't know if there's a whole bunch of people running around in the Vatican talking about, I'm going to make you an offer you can't refuse. I mean, like, I don't, I don't
Actually,
know if that's a
now I'm
thing.
wondering what he's done so far with Venezuela and Iran. I wonder if he's going to declare war on the Vatican City.
Listen, hey, back in the day, during the Renaissance time, the Vatican City actually the Vatican actually had their own army.
Yeah, they half they controlled half of Italy. I think the Papal
Hmm.
State.
They
Like the
did.
whole.
Yeah, and
But,
they had their own army. And I
but yeah,
remember, yeah,
well,
I
I can see it
mean,
now. We're
yeah.
going to invade Vatican City in Rome.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like, so like now, the Pope has to raise like his own like army. Maybe he can call NATO and see if he can get some assistance because Trump has lost his damn mind. But yeah, I mean, like, but I will have to say, like, I dig the response that the Pope had against Trump. Basically saying that, like, yeah, I'm against war. I mean, I'm the Pope. I should be. And I'm definitely against illegal wars, which this is, you know and you did not go into Iran based on intelligence. You went on in guns ablazing based on vibes. He literally said that he felt Iran was going to attack first, and that's the reason why he bombed them.
Yeah, like I heard people people same thing of like think just because you're anti-Israel government doesn't mean you're anti-Semitic.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like, you can be anti-genocide and also be anti-Semitic, and to both of those things can be true at the same time. Like, and even when you are talking about specifically Benjamin Netanyahu, the IDF, and what specifically Israel is doing to the Palestinians, and Lebanon, and Syria, and the Golan Heights, and the West Bank,
That
and
doesn't mean we want to
Gaza,
bring
and
back
all this other stuff.
like
I
that doesn't mean
mean,
we never. Yeah,
we're
just
not
because we
talking
want to.
about you're not
Just
talking
because we
about Jewish people. You're talking about the
yeah.
government of Israel.
Just because we're against the bombing of Palestine doesn't mean we want to bring back the Holocaust.
Exactly. Like, no, I mean, like, and if anything, because the main reason why there is an Israeli state right now is because of the Holocaust. I would think that your leadership should be more conscious of that and be more compassionate to the people that surround them instead of not. That's what I would think. But as I had friends that used to tell me, that's too much like right. It's too much like right. So yeah, it's
So
kettle
so
burns.
besides political stuff, what do you do for what do you do for fun? Like what's when you're
What do I
not.
do for fun? Okay, so I am a sci-fi geeky person. I love Star Trek. I'm a huge my favorite um brand is the Next Generation.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
my
yeah,
favorite captain is Avery Brooks from Deep Space Nine.
yeah. That's fine. It's fine you say that because uh, DS9 at the time was the only series I ever watched beginning to end when it officially aired. I
Yeah.
started late in TNG. I obviously
Hmm.
didn't watch the original series before
Right.
my time, and
Yeah.
then I stopped caring about Voyager somewhere in the middle. I stopped caring anymore, and I didn't see Enterprise until years later. But DS9 I saw it beginning to end when it originally aired.
Man, and let me tell you something. I mean, like, even though, like, I have a tendency to, because, like, I think that, like, when the relaunch of Star Trek happened after, the original series had been off the air for years at this time, at least about 20, oh yeah, over 20 years by the time that TNG debuted in 1987. Um,
Except for a few movies.
yeah, except for a few movies, yeah, which I saw all of them at the theater. Um,
I had the whole six VHS cassette before I got destroyed. I had the whole six VHS in a
same.
bundle thing.
Yep, same. Don't like I don't like Star Trek 5. But
Why does God need a starship?
why does God need a starship? I think that's the only line that I particularly care for, but Star Trek 5. Oh my god, that's yeah. Anyway, um but yeah, but when TNG, came out, I looked at it as that was the generation of me, because I'm now old enough to watch it without being reminded by my mother Star Trek is on. That's how I looked at it. Because, like, I used to watch the original series with her. And of course, by that time, it was in reruns. So when TNG was coming out, and then I also saw that the star of Reading Rainbow was one of the characters. What? I was sold.
I still remember my first episode. It was a Thursday Friday. It was like 10 p.m. on Fox. I should have been in bed.
Hmm.
I think it was I was sixth or seventh grade at the time. I was like 11 or 12. I was watching flipping through my 4 or 5 channels on my antenna TV, and it's
Hmm.
like I saw it comes this show, but people wearing uniforms and stuff.
Yeah.
And the first episode I ever saw was when Worf got paralyzed for a whole episode.
Oh yeah. I think that was either season
5.
5 or season 6. Was it season
Yeah,
5? Yeah.
yeah, I'm pretty sure it was season 5. But yeah, and that was my first introduction to Star Trek was
Mm.
him getting paralyzed for one episode.
I saw I we when we heard that Star Trek The Next Generation was premiering. I mean, I was there for Encounter at Farpoint when it first aired. When it first aired, I was 10 years old when it first aired. And
I think I
so,
was I might have been 6 or 7.
yeah, but
When,
now I was 10. Yeah, because in 87 I was 10 at the time, because I was born in 77. So yeah, 87 I was 10. And I remember my mom saying, I like this Q guy. Q's fun.
yeah, yeah, he wasn't yeah, he wasn't really a villain per se, but he wasn't a good guy either.
Yeah, he was what a, what a, it's kind of funny because, listening to um directors and others who were involved with the series talk about it, specifically John Delancey's character, like, he made Q the trickster. Like, basically, Q was Loki. And that's not how they wrote him at first. They had an idea of making, this omnipotent being, basically this playing judge and jury over, at the beginning of the series. And the crew of the Starship Enterprise basically had to answer the crimes of humanity. And because they were already judged as a savage race and should be eliminated, they've gone too far, all this other stuff. But like, they were just going to make him this serious arbiter. That was his idea, and they were not planning on making Q a reoccurring character. but John Delancey changed the intention of Q, and to the point where he basically turned him into this like trickster god, like from Viking lore, basically. And and he played him accordingly. And even though like you can probably count on maybe one hand how many times Q has like shown up and all throughout um Star Trek The Next Generation specifically, but every episode that he was in has been
Yeah,
pivotal.
I remember three of my favorite. One was Robin Hood episode
Oh yeah, that
where
was a good. That was cute.
the other one was
I protest, Captain. I am not a married man.
the other one was when he let Picard change his past. How,
Yeah. Oh, that was
how
a
he's
good one. That
where
was a
he's
good
like
one.
where he learned that his rebel days and as a kid made him who
Mm-hmm.
he was today.
Yep.
And the other one was the finale when Picard accidentally prevented life from happening on Earth.
Yeah. All good
Like
things. Yeah.
they're like, oh, look what you did. You prevented.
Yeah. No, that was a great episode. Yeah. I mean, like, yeah. I would definitely say those are
Of
some
course,
of my favorite.
the worst thing he ever did was introduce to bring the Borg to
Borg.
our.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's like
Yeah.
he triggered the Borg thing happening.
Well, the Ferengi at
Oh yeah,
first were supposed to be the great villain of Star Trek: The Next Generation, but they kind of the way that they introduced them, they were squirrely,
yeah.
monkey-like,
Yeah, but it's weird
doing all
how
this.
they
Yeah,
between the Ferengi of the first TNG beginning
yeah,
TNG to the Ferengi of DS9.
yeah. Huge difference. It's like a
Yeah,
180.
whole society now.
Yeah, yeah, but like, yeah, so like you saw like this evolution of the Ferengian of itself to the point where you actually had them serving in the Federation, but well, serving in Starfleet specifically. But like the way that they were written to be like the new villain. They were going to be like the Romulans, kind of the old Star Trek, like the old Star Trek. Um, but they ended up being like, when they first came out, being very clownish. So when season 2 came around, they that's when the writers went back to the drawing board and actually said that, like, yeah, the Ferengi, they're not really what we thought that they were going to be as far as like a villain is concerned. We need something more sinister, and that's when they came up with the concept of the Borg. And yeah, I'm not even gonna lie. That episode when Q was kicked out of the continuum and he was just like a free spirited entity trying to, find his way somewhere. And he says that I'm willing and able to serve. I want to join your crew. And Picard was like, yeah, what would you do? And then when he gets rejected, because Picard says, whatever's out here, we're ready to face it,
We can handle
and
it. Like
we
he's
can
like, oh,
handle
you
it.
are.
He
Oh,
said, oh, the arrogance of you. Okay, well, I got something for your ass, Picard. Damn. you know and then of course, my girl Miss Seeley, Whoopi Goldberg, is on, starts in season 2 as well. um and you know the story of how she gets on that show, right?
who?
Whoopi Goldberg. You know how she
Oh
gets,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, how she gets on. Her and LeVar Burton were friends, and she said, "Hey, call the people them and tell them I'm interested." And at first, Gene Roddenberry was like, "No, you're not. Why you know who you are?" I mean, at this time, she was already nominated for an Oscar. I don't know if she won. I don't know if she had won the Oscar yet for Ghost, but I know that she was already nominated for Oscar for The Color Purple. She was a huge deal at that time, and they said Whoopi Goldberg, EGOT, Whoopi Goldberg want to be on Star Trek: The Next Generation. You got to be kidding me. They said, yeah, she wants to be on. I'm like, yeah, right. You
Like,
are kidding me.
yeah, well, same thing. I remember what's her name? That when the horror talked about how MLK called her
Yeah,
in the '60s,
yeah, exactly. When she, because she
how
was
she
about to quit. Yeah, yeah. And he's like, I would have loved to been a fly on the wall during that conversation. I always wondered, and I wish that, and I know that Nichelle Nichols is no longer with us. R.I.P. Nichelle. Um, I got a chance to cosplay as her. I was, I had the costume and everything. Went to a Comic Con
was
dressed
it
as her.
was it the fan dance was it the fan dance one?
No, I was in the original series
Oh,
uniform. I had the red
yeah.
dress and everything. Yeah.
That was the other thing people remember. I think about the fifth Star Trek is the
Yeah.
fan dance.
The fan dance is the fifth. Don't like that. I don't like the number five. I do not like that. Anyway, yeah, and I was just like, why is Uhura up here fan dancing, singing off key? Now I'm just kidding. I was like, why is this? Oh my God, who came up with this? William Shatner? Yeah, okay, that tracks. He came up with this mess. But yeah, I if Michelle Nichols was alive and I had a chance to have a conversation with her, I would have asked her, when Dr. King called you, did he sound like the Dr. King of when he would deliver a speech and that's how he was talking to you when he was telling you to stay on Star Trek? Like, did he go, Michelle Nichols, you are the only Black American that's on television right now that is not playing a mammy. You need to stay on Star Trek because you provide proper representation for our people. We need that. Yes.
And the same thing happened not with her, but like like in the '80s and '90s, like gay LBGK represented it was like was very farce and they were mostly comedy relief.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But then but you see like the first openly open kiss between two women on television happened during Deep Space Nine. Oh, you see the first interracial kiss that ever happened on television during the original series. It's and I think that's another reason why I love the Star Trek properties, period, because Star Trek was always about being
Yeah,
progressive.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I remember. I, I was in Pittsburgh 2 years ago, and 2 3 years ago, Pittsburgh was in my one of my nieces, and we
Hmm.
saw the statue of Mr. Rogers.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Now I love Mr. Rogers. Like
yeah,
I love
yeah.
Mr.
I read an article about how people wanted to cancel him after he was in a swimming pool with a black guy. People wanted to.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like but he did that on purpose. Like I remember I was watching that the documentary and they interviewed, Francois Clemens, who first off he said he didn't want to play a cop because he has such bad history with cops for obvious reasons, right?
Mm,
And but Fred insisted. He said, not only do you want you to play a cop, but I want you to sit in the pool with us, and then both of us like are sitting here together, and we are friends, and we can play in the pool, and you're black and I'm white, and it don't and it's cool, you know. And God, I I mean, even though like he was a pastor, I loved his concept of like, of how he really wanted to present children's television, and also how he wanted to create this environment where it was pluralistic. He wanted to combat these narratives, because at the time when he first, was on television, was during the civil rights movement, right? He and he was a person that would see these particular things that was happening to black folk when they were marching, and the people who were with them as well. And um and and he just always just thought that, like bigotry, prejudice, and racism were just wrong.
Yeah,
And
what's that saying? Children aren't born racist; they're
right,
taught it.
exactly, they're taught, right, exactly, and that's exactly what he would uh would try to do, as far as like, combating those particular messages about, like, we can make a better place for us to live, but but it starts with, the values that we teach our children.
Yeah,
And that's one of the things I love about him.
a few years ago, I heard that Kirk Cameron was trying to be the next Mr. Rogers.
Yeah, no, it falls short for Kirk. uh Even though, like, funny thing, I met Kirk Cameron. I met him in, I want to say, 2002.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was a 2001, 2002. He, by that time, he was like, evangelical, and he was starting
yeah,
his tours of different churches and stuff like that. And he happened to end up at this really big church in Springfield, Illinois. Um, and he happened to come into where I work, because at the time I was working for a hotel called the Renaissance Hotel, that was right on the capital of, and because Springfield, Illinois is the capital of Illinois.
yeah.
So when I met him, and at first I didn't know who he was, I had to look at him and I was like, oh my God, I know who you are. And that he tried to witness to me. I mean, at the time I was a Christian, but he tried to witness to me. Him and the pastor guy that he was with were doing these really stupid jokes where they had like this lighted ball. They would make the ball disappear and reappear and all this other stuff. And at the time I worked at the front desk, and they kept on going, Cynthia, look this, Cynthia, look at this, right? And I was like, yeah, here's the thing. I cannot watch your stupid human trick right now. I'm working. Okay. So please stop. But
Yeah.
and then when Kirk finally went up to his room, he left me a track. And the funny thing about this, I don't know if it's cool or not, but the funny thing about the track is that it was written backwards, and you had to read it in a mirror.
Wow. But yeah, yeah, it's funny how growing up, I used to people people I used to like as a kid nowadays are
Mm,
like what Kirk Cameron, Kevin,
mm, mm.
J.K.
Oh my God,
Rowling,
Kevin Sorbo, such a disappointment.
and then even Dawkins. So like people like that how they turned out.
Also a disappointment. Yep, huge disappointment. Daniel
Like
Dennett,
I refused.
Sam Harris.
I refuse to watch the new Harry Potter, not because it probably will be good, because it will support everything.
J.K. Rowling's and her turfness. Yeah,
Her anti-trans thing.
yeah,
So even
yeah.
though I'm not nothing about the actors or anything, the thing about the actors or their stands is because same reason I don't go to Chick-fil-A anymore.
Yeah, seriously, it's a
Their
principle.
chicken's great. Their chicken's great. Great
Right.
chicken. I used to love it, but what the money supports.
Yeah, but what you support is antithetical to my values. So I can't support you. Yeah. It's I'm the same way. Like, man, I used to love Hercules and Xena when I was younger. And I
I
watched
used to
all
love
that.
I used to love growing pains.
Yeah, I did too. I watched little Mikey Seaver. Yeah, I did as well. I used to like,
I bought a few of Richard Dawkins' audiobooks.
yeah. I mean, I have the God delusion right now. I have, it's yeah, it's
But yeah,
yeah,
you learn that they're like, wow, people you thought they
yeah.
were.
I mean, like, it's like this. When did like, part? and this is a question that can be asked,
Yeah.
when do you separate the artist from the art, right? Can I still enjoy what you created even though you yourself are a tool, you know? So that's that, because I used to love Andromeda as well. But I used to ask those questions to myself when it came to listening to R. Kelly, because I used to like his very first album, solo album, 12 Play, had it on repeat. Then I realized whole time when you listen to 12 Play, he was telling on himself. Whole album. I didn't realize until much later in life. But regardless, it's it goes back to that old saying, it's like never meet your heroes, because most likely if you meet them in person, they're probably going to end up disappointing you.
Yeah. You said fast. You mentioned you said you like the Cubs.
Yeah, yeah. I used to be a big Cub fan.
But it's
I'm
fun.
I,
It's funny.
yeah,
I
go
know
ahead.
the joke like they missed it by 1 year. Back
Oh
to the
yeah, that was
Future,
2008.
2016,
Yeah.
2016. They won the World Series.
Yeah.
2015 was in the movie. Like they missed it by one year.
Right. I mean, well, remember, like, right before then, the last time that they won the World Series was in 1908. They were in the running in 2008 because they were in the playoffs and they were doing very well. Then, the whole, catch the fly ball gate happened, and they feel that, there go that Billy Goat curse. It done came up after that. But yeah, I
Yeah,
remember, yeah, watching the World Series in 2016, and I went to Wrigley Field the next day during the parade, and I took a picture in front of Wrigley Field with a picture of my dad, because my dad was a huge Cub fan, and he cried. My mom told me the story that the last time before that they were super close. I believe it was in 1967, and when they didn't win, my father cried, and my mother said, "Why are you crying? That's stupid."
oh yeah. So I used to cry. I used to cry a lot as a kid too. I got bullied. I got bullied for it
Oh
because
wow.
I was a guy and the guys are supposed to cry.
Yeah. But would you have cried if your team didn't win the World
I don't know.
Series?
I didn't really care about sports. I cried because I got picked on
Right. Well, see, well that yeah.
because of my I still do a little bit, but back then I had a really bad stuttering
Mm,
problem, speech
yeah.
problem, and people picked on me all the time.
Yeah, I got bullied a lot too when I was growing up. And it was mostly because I'm very tall. I'm the darkest skin out of my sisters, and also I was much bigger um, growing up. Like I was chubby, so I got picked on a
But
lot because of that.
I think that really made me I'll say a better person, but because I was bullied, I help bully. I not help bully. I help. I'm more sympathetic to people that get bullied now.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, like, a lot of times, like, the very thing that you suffered, the trauma that you suffered, oftentimes can do one or two things. Either it can, like, make you more hardline, or it can make you more empathetic. And I think that one of the reasons why I end up getting into social work, because that's what I do for a living, is because I wanted to help other people who didn't have the wherewithal to help themselves.
Like like in like 1996, there's a rumor going around about me that I was gay,
Mm,
and it got so bad that I had to leave schools. I had to transfer. I had to transfer to a different school.
wow,
I went to a
that's
I went to a
crazy.
I went to a CT. I went to a technology a JVS school my last 2 years
Mm,
of school of high school because I couldn't stay at my home school anymore. I had to
mm,
leave. The bullying was so bad. But now, and that was just a rumor about me. So now I feel people that actually are gay must have it worse than I do because mine was just a rumor. People
yeah,
get picked on for real. So
yeah,
must have it a lot.
yeah, yeah. I mean, like, and it's kind of funny. Because I remember, like, when you're talking about like, being bullying, and how, and then like how it even affects like, um how you even perform in school. And I remember being seriously bullied, in my grammar school. But a lot of that changed when I went to high school, because I went to a Catholic all girl high school. And I specifically chose to go to a Catholic all girl high school. And the first year that I was there, I got all A's and B's. The first time ever in my life. And when I came home with my report card and I gave it to my parents, they were like, "Did you see your report card?" I was like, "Yes." And they said, "You got all A's and B's." I said, "Yes." They said, "You're on the honor roll." I said, "Yes." And they said, "Why did you not do this in grammar school?" I said, "Because I'm not getting bullied." Stuff like that makes a difference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I got actually when I first happened, the bowling pushed me further into church for a while because
Mm,
that was the only place I felt like people were accepting of me. You know,
right.
like I had friends was
Right.
was was there. So that's one season was a slow. That's why was a slow thing because at the time it probably was, but the atheist wasn't community wasn't as they are now.
Right.
There was less social groups back then.
Oh yeah, most definitely. That's another thing that I try to promote on my show as well, is, social, secular social groups that are local. Um, I know that my executive producer runs one. I run one here in Chicago. I'm the lead affiliate for the Black Non-Believers in Chicago. Um, and other people who happen to have like, other social groups that happen to be secular, and things of that nature, like, and also like, are even doing like, work to make society better, is what, we try to definitely promote, like especially like when I have my lives, because, even though, like, both of us just talked about like our experiences with bullying, and even though at the time that both of us were Christians, right?
Yeah.
So in some cases, because church is a social network, we could retreat in some of those institutions. But what happens when people are no longer attached to those institutions? Where do they go? What do they do? So my thing is to make more people also aware, like, hey, there's, not only do you have like, groups that are online, right, that you can join and get friends, and be able to be in safe environments and not be accosted because you don't believe, but there's in person places that you can go to where that is also the case. Because I mean, one of the things that, and especially like when I've done like a lot of my interviews talking to people who were coming out of religion, a lot of times one of the things that kept them in church was not because, it wasn't because they didn't, that it was hard for them to stop believing. It was because they were afraid to give up their social group. They
That's
were
where all their
afraid to
friends
give
are.
up their community. Yeah, that's
That's
where all
where
their
their friends are.
friends, family members. Yeah. So like if I leave, I don't have my friends. I leave my friends behind. I leave, you know, I remember like, one of the church that I belonged to, that I was part of a long time. Like I was very close to, like, especially like a lot of the women that were there. But I don't talk to anybody except for one now. Just one. I mean, but because like, when I came out as atheist, I mean, like that was like the worst thing that I could have did, to the point where I just basically was like, yeah, don't, that chick right
Person non
there.
grata.
Yeah, she is persona non grata. you know. So yeah, I mean, like, and that is that's the reality a lot of times, like when you're coming out of like religious groups, and then you come to the place where we are now, where we're non-believers and we're vocal about it, that oftentimes you are, what did Jesus say? Treat them as a publican. You know, we're so they so we have we get the publican treatment. the tax the tax collector treatment. That's what we
Yeah.
get.
What's that other saying that they used to say when I was growing up? Love the sinner, hate the sin.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like, but if you're shunning people because they're no longer a believer, or they don't, like, basically, they're basically not in lockstep with your thinking. How are you loving them because you turn them away and you don't want to deal with them? Riddle me that, Batman.
What's one of the things that really, because I grew up with that mindset. You can love the person but hate what they're doing, but then when I first started deconverting, here comes the other people who like stone the gays. So like
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like, yeah, like it's that whole thing about, I serve a loving God, but there's also this whole notion of the kingdom of God suffereth violence and the violent take it by force. And Levitical law says, or remember even that one story when I would think it was Mary Magdalene, when they brought her to Jesus and say, hey, she was caught with another man, and she's married. So, the law says that we are supposed to stone her. And then he says, well, he who is without sin cast the first stone. And then they start to drop their stones and walk away. I mean, like, okay, well, you rescued the woman, but this is also the guy that said that I did not come to destroy the law, I came to fulfill it. So if you're not
and the people, he also said that I don't care about the other people. I'm here for the Israelites. So,
right, yeah, he said, I've come for I come from
yeah,
I
don't
come from
let
the
dogs
Jews.
don't let
Yeah,
dogs eat the scraps.
right, exactly. Yeah, cast not your pearl to the swine. You know, yeah. So like, and so yeah. I mean, like, the very notion, because like, and that's the part that I wrestled with a very long time, is this teaching about a loving and just God. Yet examples that we have seen by this loving and just God could be violent, could be jealousy,
Yeah,
could be murderous.
but
You know, I mean, like, and also, excommunicate you at the drop of the hat just because you said or did something that he didn't like. I mean, like, and then also being othered because you were not born in this particular group that he chose. I'm like,
yeah, actually one of the reasons that is one of the reasons why I never even as a church girl I was never a young Earth creationist, because I grew up
mm,
reading history and looking at history books, and then when they said the flood happened 4,000 years ago, 5,000 years ago, I'm like, wait a minute, weren't Native Americans over here 10,000 years ago before
yeah,
land
that don't
bridge?
make no sense.
Like there's archaeological information that they were here that back then. So how did they die and again?
Oh my, I had a whole back and forth with this one Christian guy about, like, the flood. And I said, the a worldwide flood never happened. That's scientifically impossible. And I was like, and also too, even if you look at the time period, there was people that, like, were in other parts of the world that existed, and they don't have flood stories. So if this was like a worldwide event, don't you think that it would be more stories worldwide
You
that
see,
actually would
we see is they
recollect this?
they lived, they all got erased, and then Noah's descendants really 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 fast went back to
Yeah,
where they were, picked right up.
that makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. Come on. I mean, just even if you just, like, use a little bit of reasoning, a little bit of reasoning when you think about that story. I mean, come on now, y'all. And I mean, like, and then like they said, well, there have been other flood stories. I said, yeah, and you notice where those flood stories happen in
By
areas
rivers,
that, well, yeah, by
rivers,
rivers,
ocean.
yeah, people who actually tend to live in areas where it
Yeah,
floods.
you know why? Because most of most everywhere until recently, you want to survive. You live near an ocean or a
You live
river.
by the water.
Yeah,
Right.
and
I mean,
water's
because
flood.
like, right, and water's flood. I mean, like, majority of like communities, like organized communities, especially back in the day, were by water, where water was, because
Like I think it's like at least what's it like at least last 100 years or so. People stopped doing that when
yeah,
plumbing happened.
yeah, because right, because we invented technology where we could, actually do plumbing. Yeah. I mean, like, even if you just think about, like, the spreading of the Roman Empire, like, one of the things that like really helped them, and it wasn't necessarily wars, is because they were able to irrigate water. They had aqueducts. They learned that technology from the Greeks. And they just made it more. They and they built their aqueduct systems a bit more sophisticated. But now I can start bringing building cities that's a bit more insular, because we can bring water there, because we have the technology to do it.
We don't have to be by the. We don't have to live by the river. We don't have to live by the ocean.
Right. Exactly. And then you don't have to worry about getting flooded, and then all of a sudden you die, and here come Noah with all his animals two by two. Like, you should have listened.
Oh, that reminds me of Noah. It was bad enough when they only had the modern animals on, but now they throw dinosaurs on too, and all the animals, prehistoric animals.
Yeah.
Like when you're trying to just live when you're trying to have the animals living the day on the ark, that's enough enough room. But you add everything on there.
Right. And this is why places like the Ark Encounter, that Ken Ham does, is bullshit. And you're teaching these people this stuff. And the messed up part about it is that public funds, taxpayers' funds, are helping to fund this anti-scientific, non-historical exhibit that this man has put on. That's
Yeah,
crazy.
I never went to the Ark Encounter, but before I quit church, we went to the Creation Museum twice, in 2007 and 8. We went I went there twice.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I even have a picture. I even have a picture of it somewhere. I got a picture. I got a little picture. For a long time, I had a picture. Mouse pad. But yeah,
Mm.
it was a year. It was a year later. A year or two later after I went. That's when I started deconversion. But yeah, I went there.
Mm.
I went there pre Ark Encounter. But it was. But even then, I was like, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like, I will say this, even though I went to like, my foundation for education is Catholic school, I never was taught. I mean, science was not taught at the guise of creation. It was taught by the guise of evolution. And I'm glad that, at least in that particular aspect, the Catholics weren't, at least in my school, they weren't crazy like that.
Yeah. Is it mainly I don't know what the Orthodox teach, but is it mainly the Protestants that are the pure YECs?
Um, well, it would depend. Are you talking about mainline Protestants, or are you talking about evangelicals? Because
Oh,
those are,
yeah, like there's different branches there, but yeah, I know the Catholics, at least most of them support evolution. I
yeah.
don't know what the Orthodox or do or not,
I
but
yeah, well, I mean, like, my dad was Roman Catholic, my mom was Episcopal. I was raised Episcopal, so Episcopal is, of course, mainline Protestant, and we taught evolution. I mean, like, a matter of fact, I don't necessarily even think in the missalette that we used in Catholic Church, or the Book of Common Prayer, where it would outline some of the biblical stories that they talked about, where they were really getting into that this was the actual lore of Genesis 1 and 2. I don't know. They stuck mostly. I mean, like, they stuck mostly to um, scriptures that were from the prophets, um, especially like Ezekiel and Joshua and them type of people, and Jeremiah, and mostly, and especially like the Gospels were the main, and the letters to Paul's letters, like the epistles, was mostly the exposure to biblical teaching that I was raised with when I was growing up. I
Yeah.
didn't really get into, like, some of the more damning things that the Bible said until I was an adult and I read that bad boy.
Yeah, it was my 20s when I started studying that. I was studying about Christianity in my 20s before I
Mm.
started bring away. It's that I had no idea, because I was never taught that the early Christianity was more Jewish than they teach you. And when I realized that, like it was like duh, it's obvious in my head. When you think about, because everyone think Jesus is this guy, but he was like a from the Middle East.
Yeah. And I mean, like, and especially like if you talk about like teachings that are going to be more Jewish leaning, because Christianity comes out of Judaism. Remember what they call Jesus? Rabbi. That's what
Yeah,
they.
like when people think that I've heard people complain that Jesus wasn't a Jew.
Yes, he was.
Like I know, but it's like, but yeah, it's like I never thought about that until I learned. Again, I learned stuff
Yeah. Like,
because
what do
you.
you mean? Jesus wasn't a Jew. Like, I don't know.
But yeah,
Yeah.
but it's getting the 3 hour mark now.
Yes, yes, we should wind down. Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, we
Like I
should.
said before we started, sometimes we go.
Yeah, right. That's what I'm saying. Like, like I said, well, I blocked out about a couple hours. I was looking at, I was like, yeah, we're probably gonna need to go ahead and just like turn it around for right now.
So, anything you want to advertise coming up on your channel or something you're doing?
Yeah, so well, I know that tomorrow evening at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time, I'm going to be on Let's Talk on the Skeptic Haven channel. So it's a call-in show. Make sure you guys check that out. And then I will be premiering another video. I want to say, I think that's probably going to come out the following Sunday, um, where I speak with Deanna Williams, who is um, a film producer, and started a new film company called Q Films. And though that particular film company creates content that stars BIPOC people who happen to be from the queer community. So we had a really great discussion, and that's going to be premiering on my channel, like I said, next week. Like I said, I have another video that's up where I talked about specifically Black maternal health, and I have other videos that are on that channel as well, on The Roots Matter, so at The Roots Matter on YouTube. So make sure you guys head on over there and
Uh,
subscribe.
Cass, are you planning to go to that ARC protest this year?
The Arc Encounter protest, unfortunately, it's not going to be something that I can attend at this particular time, and it's because a lot of it's because of scheduling, that I also work a 9 to 5.
Yeah,
But I know that Mandisa Thomas will be there from the Black Nonbelievers. I also
yeah,
believe that the lead affiliate from Detroit is going to be there as well. So I encourage
yeah,
people, if you're able to go, please go.
yeah. I might be going my first time. I might if I schedule a thing, but this is my first time going down there
Oh,
this year.
okay. Oh,
And the
okay,
funny thing is,
cool.
I only live an hour. I live an hour away, and I've never been there before.
Oh, well,
I don't have a
then,
car. I don't have a car. I don't
yeah.
have my own car, so I can't. Even though it's an hour away, it's can't get.
Oh, yeah, I get it. Well, hopefully, yeah, since it's an hour away, yeah, go. And also too, like I'm further down the road. Black Non-Believers is doing the revival of Reason. This will be our second time doing it. We're going to have different people from the community that's going to be there as well. I'm actually speaking at it too. So, and that's going to be in Atlanta this year in June. So if people are able to attend, you can go to you can go to blacknonbelievers.org and be able to get more information about it, and then also be able to purchase a ticket if you are able to go.
Cool. As for me, next week I'm going less reality and political and more mythical, as we talk. Maybe I guess talks about uh, video games and the mythology of behind them.
Nice.
So if you're interested in video games and their fictional made up worlds, check us out next week.
Nice.
Give a catchphrase. Give a catchphrase.
um well, this is what I say at the end of my show. I say stay grounded, stay aware, stay hydrated, and remember at the end of the day, the roots matter.
As I always say, never stop learning and enjoy the randomness. We'll see you next time. Bye. Hey, thanks for watching my podcast or Let's Play. If you want to help support my channel, you can make a monthly or yearly pledge on Patreon, or just a one-time donation on Vimeo, PayPal, or Cash App. For those looking for something to wear, we have some shirts, hats, and other stylish things in our merch store. If you enjoy gaming, you can always follow and sub to me on Twitch. For those who don't want to give money, I have an Amazon and Steam wish list who can help the channel out. And of course, just liking, leaving a comment, and sharing this video helps more than you can imagine. And always remember to never stop learning and enjoy the randomness.